Hi, it's Zoe, and today we're talking about Atomic Habits, the new book by James Clear. And we're going to be looking at how we can break bad habits and start new ones. It's a good one.
Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, your source of strategies and insights to make you a better leader. Influence, improve, inspire.
So I was at this event last night with the Institute of Managers and Leaders, and they had a guest speaker. Her name was Hannah Critchlow, and she's a neuroscientist over from the UK visiting Australia on this tour. And I remember two specific things from her talk. She had lots of interesting things, and I've taken notes, but the things that stand out are about the brain. The brain uses 20% of the calories that you ingest. So 20% of the body's energy gets sent to the brain. It's a hungry fella. And why is it? It's because all these little neurons have 10,000 connections each. So they require a lot of energy to keep that stuff firing. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. 20% of what you eat goes to your brain. So think about that. Is what you're eating fueling your brain effectively? Or is it all donuts and peanut butter? Yeah. Not donuts for me, but a little bit of peanut butter. Anyway, we'll move on from that. That was the first thing I remembered. And the second thing I remembered was she mentioned the Sea Squirt. And in context, she was talking about how some people have different reward systems in their brain, that they get fired up and animated by different activities. And like some people are activated by the experience of running and exercise, and they find that joyful reward system. And other people are more, as she said, like a sea squirt. Now, apart from the word sea squirt, which I think is fabulous, the analogy is this. Basically, the sea squirt is a little sea creature. It's a hermaphrodite creature, and it spawns by releasing both eggs and sperm, and those little things come together and create these little larvae, tadpole-like things, and they swim around until they find a place where they can bury their head into a rock or some sort of object like that, where they will spend the rest of their lives. And as they bury their head into this rock, what happens is that the creature starts to dissolve the parts of the body that it no longer needs because it's no longer swimming around. So it dissolves its gills, it dissolves its little tadpole tail, and its tiny primitive brain. The sea squirt digests its own brain. Which I think is fabulous. I've got a link in the show notes to this article which describes the sea squirt. And basically, the sea squirt looks kind of like a hollow tube which sucks in water and squirts out water the other side. It's a way of filtering food out of the water system. So it doesn't need too much brain activity for that. So in any case, her analogy, Hannah Critchlow's analogy, was that some of us are a little bit like sea squirts. We like to just kind of latch on to where we are and chill out, basically. And I think the premise for me is when it comes to your capacities, you either use it or lose it, like the sea squirt. So what has this got to do with habits? I'm not sure. I'm sure there's an analogy in there. Anyway, but I don't think we want to be like sea squirts where we start to dissolve our own brain. That is a huge waste of human potential. What I do want to talk about is the unleashing of human potential that comes in reading this fantastic book by James Clear. Now, to be honest, I had very low expectations of this book. I thought, yeah, we've heard it all before when it comes to habits. What more can this dude add to the lexicon? And I was very surprised. I was really appreciative of the depth of research that he's done in putting this book together. I think it is well-researched and thorough and extremely relevant. And it's one of the very few books I've actually picked up and gone through again and started to do the exercise and implement based on what I've read, which is ironic considering I'm an author also and I have exercises in my books. I kind of just expect people would just follow through and do them. And they don't, and I don't as well. But with this book, I did. So in today's podcast, I want to share some of the key insights I got from his book and put it to work in real time. So as I said, I pulled out the journal with this. I pulled out my journal and I did the exercises because I'm committed to making a difference in my own habits. And I think this is what this book has to offer. If you're committed to changing your experience in the world and be improving how you experience your life, then this book is a great handbook for that. All right, so let's get into it. Thank you, James Clear. By the way, I'm going to try and get him on the podcast. Could be a long shot. He's got a massive profile, so not sure if it'd be interesting coming on our little podcast, but hell, I'm going to have a go. So I think I'll probably use his habits to try and see if I can convince him to come on the show. In any case, his first premise is this: true behavior change is identity change. That's pretty profound. True behavior change is identity change. And he gives a couple of examples, right? So he says, the goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. And I think that's actually very profound when you think about that. So, because we can set these one-off targets, right? I'm going to lose 20 kilos. The goal is not just to lose 20 kilos. The goal is to become a person who takes their health seriously and is a fit and healthy person. I think we've heard that before, right? Don't get so obsessed with meeting the goal that once you get it, you give up and you return to your old patterns. What James Clear is saying is that if you want true behavior change, which produces consistent results over time, then it's an identity change. So my first question reading this is like, great, James, how do you do that? How do you change your identity? Is this going to be an affirmation type of thing where you start and you meditate and you say, I am a fit and healthy person. I am consistent with my exercise. And actually, no. There are no affirmations in his recommendation at all. This is all very action-oriented and evidence-based. So Stacey Barr would like this strategy. You don't rely on mindset. And I think this is quite, I was going to say profound again, because it is profound. This is quite powerful because it's quite different to what we hear in a lot of other self-help narratives where your mindset is key. And what James Clear is suggesting is that mindset is created out of your habits, is that you build an identity based on what you repeatedly do. That it's the action of taking regular action. It's the habit of taking regular action that builds up evidence of this new identity. You don't just embrace an identity and expect your habits to cascade from that. So that's a reversal, if you like, of the traditional narrative around identity and mindset. So let me just read a couple things about what he said. Habits are how you embody identity. Habits are how you embody identity. The more you repeat a behavior, the more you reinforce the identity associated with that behavior. So let's come back to the running example, right? So if you embody the identity of a runner, the habit of getting out each day and going for a run is how you express that identity. And the more that you do it, the more that you go out the door and run, the more that you're reinforcing the identity of being a runner. Sounds pretty obvious, right? Except when it comes to other habits which don't have such a concrete identity like a marathon runner. So his two-step process is this for building an identity, is decide the type of person you want to be and prove it with small wins. Be the type of person you want to be and prove it with small wins. So let's look at step one. Decide the kind of person you want to be. And he asks these pretty powerful questions. What do you want to stand for? What principles and values do you want to have? And who do you wish to become? Not everybody has the insight to be able to answer those off the cuff, by the way. They're pretty intense, kind of big picture questions. So he says, start with something easier. What kind of results do you want? Now, people go, yeah, okay, I can start with that. Start with that and you work your way backwards. So like the marathon runner, so well, the result I want is to run a marathon. It's a big achievement quest. It's something I've always wanted to do. Therefore, I'll start with that. And then you ask, okay, who is the type of person who would run a marathon? And then you have to think about it. It's like, well, if I'm going to be someone who runs a marathon, what do I need to do? What kind of practices do I have? And you realize to be a marathon runner, be someone who runs a marathon, you need to be dedicated. You need to be committed. You need to be consistent. And you need to be purposeful. So all of a sudden you start creating an identity about the person who runs a marathon. And you can start with I'm the kind of runner, I'm the kind of athlete that, and you fill in the blank. Okay, so I decided at this point in reading the book that I would start to apply James Clear's techniques to my own life as a living, live, public experiment for you all, with the objective of encouraging you to do the same. So I would be encouraging you, A, get the book, B, get your journal, and then follow his recommendations on how to put this into practice. So here we go. Here's my example. So I looked at the result I wanted to create in my world. And I want to be fit, energized, and wakeful of energy. I've been noticing over the last 2 years in particular, especially coming out of adrenal fatigue, that I often wake and I feel a bit sluggish. I feel a bit tired, and I'm not bouncing out of bed, and it bothers me. So I want to be someone who's fit, energized, and wakes full of energy. So I filled in the next sentence with, I'm the type of corporate athlete who has dedicated rituals for eating, for sleeping, for exercising. I'm the type of corporate athlete who has dedicated rituals for eating, for sleeping, and exercising. Now, I was very specific in my choice of words. Corporate athlete, because I think it's what my clients relate to, and it's also it's got that elite nature to it that I want to embrace, meaning that I am living a high-octane life. I have a lot of commitments with my clients and my work, and this requires high-octane fuel. So the athlete part really resonates with that identity of elitism, and the corporate piece reminds me of my mission. And then the rituals, instead of habits, I really want them to be rituals, because rituals has a connotation of sacredness to it. And I want to think about my activities that are fundamental to eating, sleeping, and exercising as a sacred kind of experience. Now, that's putting a lot of onus and focus on this. And it's like, yes, because if I'm going to continue to live a high-octane life, I need the very best fuel, the very best rest, and the very best rituals in order to bring that about. All right, so James Clear says, formation of all habits is a feedback loop. So now that we've done this first part, part one is identify who you want to be, what you want to stand for. And then going back to what he said here is prove it with small wins. That's step 2. So the small wins piece, we'll get to that in a second. With this identity piece, he says the focus should always be on becoming that type of person, not getting a particular outcome. So becoming the type of corporate athlete who has strong rituals around eating, sleeping, and exercising, and who lives a high-octane life, that's the type of person I want to embody and become. Okay, so he says habits are about having something, not about having, I already said that. What we want to do is have an outcome change, a process change, and an identity change. And he has a 4-step process, which he's built on other work by Charles Duhigg and others to create this 4-step process. And cue, craving, response, and reward are the 4 steps. And I'm going to unpack both of those for application to creating good habits and breaking bad habits, as he outlines in his book, and as it pertains to my particular ambition of living a high-octane life. Okay, so we'll unpack each of them. For a cue, that's like, how do you know? This is the trigger that gets you to do something. This is the cue either for a good habit or a bad habit. And if you're going to create a good habit, you want to have the cue become obvious, something that's very easy to spot. And if you're trying to break a bad habit, you want to make the cue that triggers the bad habit invisible. Right? Like, if we think about this, if you have a bad habit of eating chocolate every day, you make it invisible. You get rid of the chocolate. And if you want to have a better habit of eating celery every day, you cut it up and you have it in a nicely presented bowl that's easy to grab out of the fridge. All right. So some of these things you already know, but that's a good starting point. Cue, make it obvious, make it invisible. Craving is the cue sparks the craving. The cue says, here is something I desire to do, whether it's good for you or not. And if you want to create a good habit, you want to associate the new outcome with being an attractive piece. And if you want to break a bad habit, you want to make that craving be unattractive. So you heap negative associations with that behavior. I'm going to give some examples in a minute as we walk through my own examples with this. just bear with me as I run through the structure of this. So cue, craving. The third one is response. And that's the actual activity or the actual habit that you have. If you're trying to create a good habit, you want to make the response easy. And if you're trying to break a bad habit, you want to make it difficult. And the last piece is the reward. So we are dopamine cravers, which means that we do anything to get a sense of satisfaction at the end of it. So if we're trying to create a good habit, we want to make sure the reward is satisfying, and we want to break a bad habit that reward is unsatisfying. Okay, so practical examples. So in my quest to live a high-octane life, I want the good habit of good sleep hygiene, right? So this is, I think, critical to my being able to wake up full of energy, is having good sleep hygiene. What I mean by sleep hygiene is sleep habits, getting ready for bed, how I manage my sleep habits. How I manage it right now is badly. So sometimes I'll stay up later than I should watching Netflix because it's a good show, and it's just one more episode, and you get sucked into the habit of watching it because Netflix just scrolls through and they keep putting on those episode after episodes, and you get pretty hooked into it. So that's one of my bad habits. And one of my bad habits is taking my iPad to bed, and instead of just reading my book, which is, I use electronic Kindle on my iPad, I'll just turn to the dopamine hit of checking emails, and it's almost unbearable. I have to confess this, but this is what happens. Checking emails, going to social media, and getting those little dopamine hits by doing that stuff. And then you get sucked in, and it's late, and then your brain is activated in a way that you don't want. And if I forget to put in my blue blocker glasses, then I've had this extra stimulation of the screen, and the whole thing gets disrupted. Okay, so that's the bad habit. That's what we want to change. So the good habit that I want to implement gets unpacked this way. So let's just run through how I'm going to do sleep hygiene, my ultimate sleep hygiene routine. So cue, I'm going to set my alarm for 8:30 at night, which means if I'm downstairs watching TV, that's it. It's over. It's time to shut down. That is the cue. I'm going to set another alarm at 9 p.m., which is lights out. I know, right? I'm such a nana. But this is my actually sleep and wake pattern, is go to bed at 9, get up at 5. Because I have a particular morning routine that works well for me that starts at 5. We won't go into that because we need to set, but so the morning routine depends on me going to bed at a decent time. So if I don't go to bed at a decent time, i.e. 9 p.m., then I miss out on my 8 hours and things get thrown out backwards, and it's a negative cascading effect. So this is really important. 2 alarms, 8:30 p.m. to start sleep routine and 9 p.m. to lights out. So that's my cue. My craving is like, okay, what's going to make me break away from Netflix and the iPad in order to move towards sleep routine? 2 things make it attractive. One is essential oils. Like, I love the smell of essential oils, and if you use particular ones, you rub them on your feet, it's really relaxing, it's really enjoyable. So I'm going to make sure that we have essential oils as part of the evening routine. And the other thing I find really enjoyable is reading my fiction books. So I'm going to make sure that when the alarm rings, I know that I can anticipate the reward is going to be able to read that book and put on the essential oils. So response is the actual activity. So set alarm, 8:30, 9 p.m. Actual activities then go into my regular pattern of behavior, which is brush your teeth, wash face, put on night cream, and then the bad habit kicks in, which is pick up the iPad and surf. So that's the part I need to change. So what James Clear suggests is a habit stacker. And he gets this from BJ Fogg of Tiny Habits. So if you want to introduce a new good habit, add it to an existing habit you already do, and then back it up with a reward. So this is how I'm going to do it. My current habit is wash face and brush teeth. Then I'm going to introduce a habit I want to introduce that is not currently in place, and that's writing in my journal. Yep. It's sitting there next to my bedside, but do you think I ever write in it religiously? No. So introduce journal, and then my reward is going to be to read the novel. So I'm already doing teeth and face. I'm already reading at night, and we'll come back to how I'm going to make sure I don't then surf on the iPad. I'm going to introduce journaling in there as part of a way to shore up my evening routine and my getting ready for bed. The journaling is important because it's a way of tapping into that sense of gratitude and review and processing, which is actually really important for the brain to do. It helps build the connections and synapses and process your experience of the day, which will help create better sleep afterwards. Okay, so habit stacking is you start with a habit you already have, pile on a habit you want to introduce, and sandwich it next to a habit that it's kind of a reward habit. And there you can build habit stacking. So that's a little bit easier than trying to start something from scratch. Okay, so that was the good habit routine. Now, how am I going to break this bad habit of the iPadding? If we look at the recipe, the cue is make it invisible. So I've had a really good think about this, and I think I'm going to try buying a Kindle device and having a single-use device. I know it's not the done thing. I think this is the best way to do it, because if I have my iPad there, and even if I turn off the Wi-Fi, it's so easy to turn it back on. So if I think, okay, if I'm really going to hack myself and really take away the temptation, if I have just the Kindle there, which doesn't have email and internet on it, then that's my cue for reading a novel. And I only put novels on the Kindle, so I won't put any business books on there. The Kindle becomes my relaxation downtime. So everything gets bundled up into that. So I'm going to try that. I'm going to go and order a Kindle now and have that as my cue. Now, the reward or the craving is the craving to read the novel, because that's always a good stuff. And the response is, as I've stacked it in there with the current habit, is to do it after teeth-face journal, and then I get to read. And I also have the alarm clock set at 9 p.m. to cut me off. So I've got a short window, a couple minutes as part of my routine. So actually that's quite an incentive. So if I want to read longer, I will shut the TV off earlier and hurry up and get through my other routine so I can get to the good stuff, which is reading the novel on my single-use device, which will keep me from getting hijacked into internet land. And the reward, or to avoid the bad habit, is knowing that I have to declare I've had a bad sleep because I didn't follow my routine. And the social shame of that, I'm hoping, will keep me from breaking this new commitment. Now, the other part about the good habit I forgot to mention here is, how am I going to make this new sleep hygiene rewarding, even more so? You know, there's the reward of reading the book, but the reward that's going to make it visible for me is I'm going to also get an aura ring. And you might have heard of these things. I'll put links to these into the show notes, which will be at zoerouth.com/podcast/atomic habits. The aura ring is a device that you can buy, and apparently Prince Harry's got one too. And you wear it like a ring, and it basically tracks your biochemistry and your energetic output during the day and also at night. And so it's a great self-quantification habit. My friend Stacy's just got one. I'm looking forward to talking to her about it. But basically, you wear it while you're sleeping, and it tells you how well you slept the night before. That is incredibly motivating. So I already track my HRV, my heart rate variability, and that gives me an indication of how my nervous system is doing, my nervous system health. This will show me how my sleep quality is going. And that's motivating. To see progress is motivating. So that's how I'm going to create this new habit as being motivating. Okay, sum up. All habit change is identity change. How do you change your identity? You actually start by creating new habits. It's kind of a circular feedback loop. So start with the person who you want to become. I'm the type of person who does blah, and then you start with small wins. You start on this new activity. And then there's little hacks that are all listed in James's book around habit stacking and so on. So I will report back in a couple of weeks. I'll give it a couple of weeks. I won't just report back next week. Give it a couple of weeks to let you know how it goes. Plus I have to order the Kindle and the Oura Ring. And I think there's a back order for the Oura Ring. So that might take a little bit of time. In the meantime, that's my intention. I've declared it publicly. It's all going to be good. So what can you take away from this? Think about the bad habits you have and decide how you can make them invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying. And create good habits where you make them obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. and stack them with what you're already doing. All right, so big recommendation and hats off to James Clear. I thought he did an awesome job with this book. It's well worth the purchase and the read and the implementation. So in the meantime, guys, live well, lead well, have a great day.